Hello and welcome to the third episode of our Lange series. In the previous episode, we went through the foundation and the first collection of A Lange Söhne introduced in 1994. Following the highly successful launch on the eve of 24th of October, now it was just starting for the brand, expanding the collection with equally charming pieces by pushing the technical front without diluting the strong identity. In this episode, we are going to discuss the defining elements of the Lange design, things that make a Lange watch, the introduction and the expansion of the 1815 collection, the introduction of the Langematik and Saxomat, the introduction of Cabaret, and finally, the background, introduction, and the importance of the Datograph. Let's go. To start with, there are two elements that I'd like to draw attention: the custom typeface and the case design of A Lange Söhne. Respectfully traditional. This is how SJX and the designer Larry Peer describes the typeface of A Lange Söhne. According to Mr. Peer, the typeface is based on engravers made by a German engraver, Robert Wiepking. I'm saying based because the standard use was not adequate for Mr. Blomer. He ordered a custom, modernized cut based on the engravers, resulting in a unique appearance that will make any A Lange Söhne watch immediately recognizable. Another delightful evidence of attention to detail is of course the ampersand. Again, custom made, the top of the ampersand is flat when the logo is curved and vice versa in order to deliver the visual balance. The case design, on the other hand, was again from the wide-ranging genius of Blomer. He wanted to deliver heft, strength, and presence. And I think Walt Odets summarizes the feeling of a Lange case the best on a first-generation Saxonia. I quote, "At 34mm and a slightly thick 8.5mm or so, it looked like a biscuit and was twice the weight a gold watch its size ought to be. I quickly realized that, by comparison, all other watches suddenly felt hollow, like empty cases, like thin stampings, with no hint of a movement inside." To create such a feeling, Lange watches follow three-body construction as the bezel, case band, and the case back. While the bezel and the back is polished, the band is brushed. The lugs are sculpted with generous angles and separated from the brushed case band with the mirror polished notches at the base. The detail was created by Blomer himself over the first prototypes. Since the introduction, every Lange watch adheres the same codes, resulting in a distinct, tasteful, and a unique appearance. One note here before I move on: the pink gold cases were fully polished until 2017 or so. As mentioned, expansion was on the horizon for A Lange Söhne, and they were quick. Between 1994 and 1999, we saw the introduction of numerous Lange 1 editions, the 1815, Langematik, and Cabaret collections. Before moving on to the highlight of the episode, I'd like to briefly go over these three lines. A Lange Söhne introduced in 1994 collection pieces in various metals. For example, the Lange 1 also came in platinum with solid case back, delivering an addictive heft to the otherwise sleek piece. In a rather short span, we saw numerous additions to the Lange 1 family, each one more collectible than the other, such as the Lange 1 Dot, the Stealth, the Lange 1 white gold blue dial, and the yellow gold blue dial. The stainless steel Lange 1 pieces were also produced within this period, which you can read more about them from the link in the description. The brand's first special edition of the Lange 1 collection was also introduced in 1998, the Lange 1A, limited to 100 pieces, a piece made to commemorate the new manufacture building, an adventurous edition with solid gold guilloche dial and a brilliant tribute on the back, solid gold balance and escape wheel cocks. To this day, the Lange 1A stays certainly as one of the most exotic additions of the collection. The first collection to be introduced after the Fantastic Four was the time-only 1815 collection, which was introduced in 1995, an adage to Lange's pocket watches designed with the elements borrowed from the olden days. On the dial, from outside the inside, we have the railway minute track surrounding the dial. Following the three dots on each 15-minute marker captures the attention. A note to Saxony porcelain's floral designs. Further into the dial, thick printed numerals with custom typeface offer a brilliant and harmonious view. On the back, a brilliant glashütte movement greets us with its characteristic details. The three-quarter plate of the modern caliber is identical in construction to its pocket watch ancestors, right down to its curves and even the jewel placement. The hand-engraved balance cock, screwed balance wheel, escape wheel cap, blue screws and gold chatons are all in place. I can easily say that at its time, as well as today, with its updated version, the basic caliber is one of the best value offerings in modern watchmaking, with its character, level of craftsmanship and handwork it offers. The 1815 collection was also quickly expanded with the introduction of a personal favorite of mine, 1815 Up and Down. 1815 Up and Down takes its inspiration from the patent number 9349 acquired by A Lange Söhne in 1879. Through its lifetime, A Lange Söhne applied this patent to perhaps hundreds of pocket watches. With such historical significance, it only made sense for the modern A Lange Söhne to make use of such an important part of its heritage. And what is better than the 1815 collection to do so? From the beautifully balanced up-down indications coupled with traditional hallmarks of the 1815 collection to the overall architecture of the movement, 1815 Up and Down is like a summary of A Lange Söhne's 150 years of watchmaking in 36mm. Again in 1997, A Lange Söhne introduced a very unusual and very rarely known watch, the 1815 Blomer. Putting aside the inaugural Tourbillon pour le Mérite, this piece is the brand's first special edition and the only one to carry the double-signed moniker. It was a special order made for the Düsseldorf retailer Blomer in 10 pieces. A watch that goes completely against the brand's understated appearance, which I thought it might even be a fake, but here we are. A quirky jewel that almost nobody even heard of. On the other hand, the same year with the Up and Down and Blomer, A Lange Söhne introduced a counter-thesis to the Up and Down, one might say, the Langematik. It was A Lange Söhne's hooray into the uncharted waters, guided by the exceptional mind of Helmut Geyer. The collection was offered with and without the big date in all precious metals. Langematik models carry sharp, lumed hands and elongated button hour markers. The use of space on the dial is just right. Appearing completely symmetrical, the sax-o-mat inscription at 4 o'clock tastefully breaks the balance. I would go as far and say it is one of the first sporty, elegant watches of the brand. On the back of the Langematik, an equally intriguing, characteristic masterpiece greets us, the sax-o-mat. Its design is exactly how one would imagine an automatic caliber from A Lange Söhne. Geyer managed to brew historic aesthetics with modern technicality, and the result of such synthesis is just splendid. The platinum centrifugal mass gives a bit more strength to the overall wrist presence of the watch. The solid gold rotor is fully engraved to accompany the curves of the balance cock. The finish is sublime, as usual from Lange, and the area to actually observe that finish is wide and compelling, unlike the current L086. I don't know if there is ever going to be a better movement from the brand. To be honest, I highly doubt it, as the bar for automatic movements was already set at 10 out of 10 in 1997. From the round pieces, we move on to an utterly interesting one, the Cabaret. Introduced in 1997 in Basel, a fun, witty, and a watch with full of character. Non-round watches have been done in many shapes and dial designs. Some of the most well-known examples are surely from Cartier or Gilbert Albert's design of Patek Philippe in the 50s and 60s. Yet, with Cabaret, A Lange Söhne finds a way to differentiate still, thanks to the big date and very well thought out lines and delightful case details. Starting from the case, we see that the protruding lugs are kept and giving a bit more detail to the Art Deco inspired case, a bit more sharpness, I might say. The indexes and numerals all point towards the center, forming a focus point. Roman numerals are borrowed from Lange 1, whereas the diamond-shaped indices are from the first Saxonia collection. The numerals and indices sit on their own area, bordered by two rectangulars, which adds further to the Cabaret's geometry. Everything is defined on this watch. Cabaret's caliber is the second non-round A Lange Söhne movement. Aesthetic-wise, it is as A Lange Söhne as it gets, housing all the hallmarks of the brand. The anglage is very well done and the curvatures are truly delightful. A caliber that tells us, albeit with a slip at the beginning, Lange was devoted to keep the one watch, one movement principle. Following highly successful collections, 1999 showed us that A Lange Söhne was actually keeping the crown jewel for the turn of the millennium. Of course, you know what it is, none other than the Datograph with the beating heart in-house caliber L951.1. In order to fully understand this watch, we must look back and ask why. It was a time when most of the big brands were relying on outsourced movements. Not that anything is wrong with that, but why Lange, merely a startup still, went on to take such a big adventure? Well, that's a good business case. In the famous business book Positioning, The Battle for Your Mind, the authors talk about a concept called the product ladder. Basically, each step of the ladder is a brand name, and each different ladder represents a different category. So, if you are late to the market as A Lange Söhne, you need to compete with an already established ladder in the prospect's mind. A Lange Söhne had only one choice to step out: create your own ladder or just disappear, which has been the guiding principle of the modern brand. Product-wise, up until 1999, we saw this mainly with Lange 1 and Tourbillon pour le Mérite. Creating a ladder for the chronograph, however, was not an easy feat. Moreover, the brand did not have a past where they could get inspired from, neither for the design nor for the movement. Looking from the full side of the glass though, I can say that it was lucky for Lange, simply because they weren't bound to any templates. They were free in their design. It took 5 years to design, develop, and craft this piece, and in 1999, A Lange Söhne unveiled the Datograph flyback. The in-house chronograph of such magnitude, architecture and finish was the new ladder. Lange introduced the Datograph in platinum at Basel Fair in a small shared booth with siblings IWC and Jägerle-Coultre. There was not a giant watch in the booth as it is the tradition now, but a giant movement model, perhaps just to increase the rushing heartbeat of the Swiss competitors and to give them the opportunity to closely examine what they would have to deal with. The first generation Datographs measures 39mm in diameter and a relatively hefty 12.8mm in thickness. When you strap the watch, the density and the weight of the platinum case is immediately there. Yet, upon enjoying it for some time, its solid feeling creates a dangerous addiction, causing many other pieces to feel hollow, as Walt Oda suggests. The signature case construction is present with every detail. What's even more are the pushes, which follow the same finishing while matching the curve of the case. As it is the case with most thick A Lange Söhne watches, the case back is slightly raised and then drops towards the sides. It is there to accommodate the movement, but also a visual trick to hide the thickness when on the wrist. I must add that due to this design feature, Sometimes the watch doesn't sit right when worn, sometimes it feels wobbly. However, this is far from being a deal breaker. Looking at the dial, it is clear that the Lange Datograph is a lesson on constructing a geometrically harmonious design. A closer look reveals the very well thought out details. As the big date is the paramount element, the subdials are placed below the center to strike an overall balance. The three indications form an equilateral triangle. Moreover, the Roman numerals form another triangle between themselves, hence beautifully balances out the subdials and the big date. Datograph's dial is mathematically perfect, but not without a soul. The soul reflects strength and sturdiness with bold elements, a perfect companion to its hefty case and baroque indices. Simple yet exquisitely shaped button indices tastefully complement the complexity brought by the Roman numerals. The gold hands are relatively broad and lumed, enhances legibility while contributing to the Datograph's chic, sporty look. All these elements result in an irresistibly charming, harmonious piece of art. Flipping this dense platinum, we see the caliber L951.1. The Datograph's movement alone deserves its own 30 minutes video, to be honest. Not for its technicality, actually. The caliber L951.1 is not a groundbreaking movement, so to speak. It is a traditionally constructed horizontal clutch column wheel chronograph. Nevertheless, what puts it in a different league is its incomparable depth and harmony of finish techniques. It took years for the team to turn the L951.1 into a reality. As I've heard many times, especially the precise minute counter needed hundreds of redesign and many solutions to make it work properly. If you'd like to read more on this particular mechanism, the link to the patent attained in the 1998 by Reinhard Meis is in the description down below. Before admiring and writing poetry on its beauty, first let's understand how the Datograph, hence a chronograph, works by briefly going over the mechanism. Let's highlight the parts. We have the column wheel, the clutch lever with running seconds, and the chronograph wheel. The processor of the caliber is the column wheel. It is the link between the pushers and the function we see. If you look closer, you are going to see that the clutch lever, zero reset lever, and the operating lever are all connected to it. The chronograph becomes active when the operating parts of the chronograph mechanism connect to the running movement. When the button is pressed, column wheel spins forward and pushes the clutch lever's tail in between the pillars. With this motion, the clutch lever moves horizontally and meshes with the chronograph wheel, and the hand starts to run. To stop, the clutch lever sits on the pillar again and disengages from the chronograph mechanism. How about flyback? This mechanism makes it possible to stop and reset a running chronograph mechanism with a single pusher activation. The two essential parts of the feature are two-armed heart lever and the coupling wheel. Upon pressing the button, the zero reset lever is pressed downwards and a pin transfers this motion to the heart lever. When the heart lever is pressed downwards, it presses the flyback lever to the left. Thus, the lever presses the coupling wheel and detaches it from the chronograph seconds wheel, thus stops the chronograph. On its downward motion, the heart lever contacts with the heart-shaped cam as well. Since the cam is connected to the chronograph seconds wheel, when the heart lever's tail pushes the cam, the chronograph hand goes back to the zero position. When the pusher is released, the heart lever is pulled upwards and the whole process starts back in order. Now, please join me while we travel over this mechanical jungle. There is a dangerous temptation that every Lange owner can easily fall into: wearing the watch case back up. Here, the Datograph makes a very strong case for such inducement. The three-dimensional construction of the movement brings an unrivaled depth, offering a myriad of angles, finish techniques, and new things to discover with every glance. The bass three-quarter plate as well as the chronograph bridges are made of German silver, whereas the chronograph work is made of steel. The contrast created by the German silver's warm hue and the steel's cold grey is just delightful. I was awestruck upon observing the work going into each and every one of these pieces. In this 30 mm diameter area, one can find 9 different finishing techniques. As a final remark, one of the most celebrated specs of the Datograph is its pusher feeling, and I assure you, the fame is not for nothing. The engineering and watchmaker's prowess goes into creating such a buttery smooth experience is beyond me, yet the results are easily comprehensible. It is very consistent, impossible to activate on accident, yet silky smooth when needed. In broad context, the Datograph is one of the most important elements of the modern watchmaking history. For Lange, it is undoubtedly one of the faces of the brand, one of the watches that put them on the map and perhaps at the top of the pyramid. What I care about the most though, there is no other watch that one can put next to it and decide based on only small details. No, it is different and characteristic. It is not a derivative. Its movement is quite possibly the best looking chronograph ever made. These combined qualities put Datograph in a league on its own. In the year 1999, A Lange Söhne was a force that already seemed unstoppable. The next decade brought even more with myriad of special editions, remarkable inventions, and a further growing A Lange Söhne. Thank you.